when I was thinking about becoming a pilot, it was from a very, very young age, but I had a number of limiting beliefs that had stopped me from even pursuing it as I was growing up. If I was earning millions and millions of pounds, I still would be a pilot. I genuinely believe I don't need the money, to be honest, to make me happy. What makes me happy is the fact that I'm doing a job that I've always wanted to do and always have been passionate towards. Imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. And that resonated so deeply with me because I realized actually I'm only going to be this young one. Roger Bannister, the first man to ever do the 4-minute mile. And then very, very shortly after, 12 other people were able to do it. The moment that I physically carried on, like in terms of the takeoff and everything, that was the moment that I decided, yeah, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. I credit so much of my success, particularly to my mum and dad. And my mum, she helped me massively financially. She was working 3 jobs in order to fund the training for my pilot course. I think if you don't take action on the opportunities you have in front of you, then you're missing out and you're letting that ancestral tree down. It's fine.
Meet Adham Bhatti, a young man who went from working as a shopping assistant to soaring through the skies as a commercial airline pilot. What makes his story even more remarkable? He completed his pilot exams at just 19 years old and earned his wings by 22. But this isn't just a story about career change. It's about vision, determination, and the courage to pursue what seems impossible. Today, Adham runs pilot mentoring, where he helps others navigate the same incredible transformations he made, taking aspiring pilots from zero experience to airline cockpits. His story proves that with the right mindset and guidance, you can literally reach new heights, no matter where you start. Adham, welcome to Evolve and Inspire. How are you? Okay?
Yeah, it's nice to be here, Huzefa. It's an honor. It's an honor to be able to talk on your platform, alhamdulillah.
How's it been in Dubai so far?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it so far. This is my first time in Dubai. And to be honest, it's unlike anywhere I've ever been in my entire life. And I think it's just accredited to the wealth and investment that is involved in this particular city. You won't see like skyscrapers. Just outside of this building, I saw the Burj Khalifa and I was thinking, oh my gosh, that is incredible. It just makes you really awe-inspired at the amount of wealth that is in this city, but it also makes you very motivated to pursue also the same levels of achievement that you can see around you on a day-to-day basis. Like I woke up this morning and I was just looking at the marina thinking, this is incredible. Like alhamdulillah to be in this position right now where I can actually wake up in front of such a beautiful place like Dubai. But alhamdulillah, yeah, so far I've been really, really enjoying it here in Dubai. And it's a pleasure to be invited here to speak to with you as well. That's the biggest honor, to be honest, to be of being here. Alhamdulillah.
Take me back to your youth, you growing up. Where did you go to school? How were you like in school?
So yeah, if I was to retrace my steps as to how I got into the industry first and foremost, and in fact, Huzefa, I'm going to interject because before we do that, what I want to do, because you in your introduction alluded to the fact that we should be aspiring for the best and most elite levels in terms of our endeavors and ambitions. What I want to do, and something that's really important for pilots, is memory. So what I'm going to do is ask you to test my memory. Okay. And what I'm going to ask you to do, Huzefa, just for a bit of fun, is list maybe 10 or 11 objects. And what I'm going to do is memorize them. And at the end of the podcast, just as a kind of a proof to yourself of how we can hack our brains into being incredible organs in our body, at the end of the podcast, what I'll do is I'll regurgitate that list for you. And this is essentially to show you that when it comes to memory acquisition, when it comes to people learning things under highly stressful and quite difficult situations, such as if you were in an emergency situation as a pilot, you can hack your brain into resorting to not going into the limbic system, but going into the prefrontal cortex, where you actually think logically as a human being rather than a animal, if you see what I mean. So what I'm going to do is ask you, Huzefa, if you can list maybe 10 objects, list them slowly so that I can kind of download them in my brain, and I'm going to explain how I did it. So yeah, just list the first object, whatever object that comes to your mind, just list it and I'll try and remember it.
See, I don't want to say things like in here because it'll make it a bit easier for you.
No, yeah. You can say whatever, random things, maybe in your house, in the day, that from the start of the day, whatever you've seen as you've gone throughout the day, just anything that comes to your mind.
Car.
All right, 1 second. Okay, I've got a car.
Laptop.
Okay, I've got a laptop.
Eggs.
Okay, that one's a bit harder.
Watermelon.
Okay, I've got a watermelon.
Sandwich.
Okay, sandwich is acquired. We can keep going, by the way, for as long as you want to.
Ball.
All right, I've got a ball.
Lion.
Ooh, that's a nice one. I like that. Yeah, I've got the lion.
Cat.
Ah, nice. I like that as well.
Baby.
Okay, wow, that's a good one. All right, we can carry on if you want, but we'd be going for the rest of the podcast.
Lamp.
All right, last one.
That's 10.
All right, I've got that. So let me just retrace my steps. So we've got a car, a laptop, then we go to, you said, what was the one after that? Laptop?
Even I don't know.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Okay,
Let me look at it. So eggs. Then we went to watermelon.
Yeah.
Then we went to ball, lion, cat, baby. All right. So I've got those now locked in. And lamp. Sorry, that was the last one that you added. All right, I've got you. I need to actually. There we go. I've got that. All right. So I've got them all now. And at the end of the podcast, just as proof that I've just hacked my brain into remembering that, I've not got any like notes to take notes. This is all in my head now. And at the end of the podcast, we'll discuss whether or not I was right and whether or not those are still locked into my brain.
Harsha, can you just make a note of them?
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to prove to the audience as well that this is actually factual. I'm not lying. Although they could probably go back to the beginning. But no. So what I just did there, Josefa, was a tool called visual recall. And what I essentially did, there's something called the Loci method of memorizing stuff. And this can apply to businesses as well. When it comes to at the start of your day, most business owners have ideas of what they need to do for the course of the day. As you get throughout the day, things can come your way, distractions and diversions, and then you can forget, oh, like what was I supposed to be doing? What was next in my order of things to do? And this is a method that I use to basically remember this is what I need to do from each step of the day without forgetting everything. And it's also for aspiring pilots and for pilots, it's a really useful method that I teach to my clients to help them when it comes to memorizing any bits of information. And it's called the Loci method. What it essentially roots from is there was a guy in really, really early Greece who's called something, I can't remember exactly, but what happened was they were in a community, like a community hall, a central hall for their town. And that hall actually collapsed and it basically killed most of the guys in the room. And there was only one guy left standing. And what he did was essentially those guys that were all collapsed and like squashed in that community hall, he had to identify who was in that room. And the way he identified them was by remembering where they were sat in each position of that room. And that's why it's called the Loci method, because Loci stands for like location, right? Yeah. So he used their locations to identify who was sat in the room and where they were sat. So what we do now is essentially apply the same method. So what I did just there was walk myself through my kitchen. And so I associated and attributed the things that you were saying. I said car, and that was like on the corner of the room. And then we moved on to laptop. Then we went on to eggs, watermelon, and we went on to the ball. And I was associating places to all of those things. What I teach my clients to make it very, very simple is memory is as easy as pi, P-I-E. So the first part we have to do in order to remember a list or remember anything that we're trying to remember, we go to the place. So for example, for me, it was the kitchen. Then I stands for imagination. So we utilize our imagination to essentially just come up with these weird scenarios. So the car I imagined was like vertically slanted against my kitchen door. It's a random thing, right? But what we're doing by imagining something really ridiculous is offsetting forgetting. And that is the key to memorizing anything. If you can offset the chances of you forgetting something, then there is more likelihood that you are going to remember that thing. If, for example, we were outside and on the Burj Khalifa, we just saw like an elephant doing a handstand, that is something you would never forget for the rest of your life, right? Yeah. So that's what we're basically trying to do to our brain, imagine these weird scenarios and use our imagination in order to get... yeah, no worries. And use our imagination in order to get this weird kind of like offsetting of forgetfulness. Then we have E, which is entwine. So we entwine both the place, the imagination, and the material that we're trying to learn to wherever we're doing. So we're entwining it all together essentially. And that is basically how you can memorize pretty much anything. And you could have carried on for as many objects as you wanted to, but that would have taken a very, very long time. Yeah, we could have. Maybe, inshallah. But this is the method that I use, and I help a lot of aspiring pilots to memorize particularly hard lists, memory items in highly stressful situations, such as in an emergency situation. You can resort straight back to a place that you're very, very familiar with. And that will essentially, one, calm you down, but it will bypass that limbic system, that chimp mind, as Steve Peters says. It will bypass that system and go straight to the prefrontal cortex, where we're thinking logically as a human being. But yeah, anyway, I've gone into that massive tangent for you.
Well, when did you develop this understanding of having memory? Was it from a young kid, or is it just recent?
This is the beautiful element, and this is why I interjected in the very, very first instance. Because when I was starting out, when I was thinking about becoming a pilot, it was from a very, very young age, but I had a number of limiting beliefs that had stopped me from even pursuing it as I was growing up. When I was younger, it was always like, oh, I wanted to be a superhero. I like Peter Pan, I like Superman, all of these amazing like superhero characters. And one thing for me is, and I think most people, is you'd love to always be a superhero. And obviously for me, the biggest superpower was flight, and I thought that would be cool. Like if I could fly and see what Superman and all Peter Pan and all these guys see. And so it was just a childhood dream, and this is what most people dream about when they are a child. It's like, oh, I'd love to be a pilot, I'd love to be an astronaut, these kind of things. It's all very, very like surface level. And as I went throughout life, it was always that. It was always just a deep-rooted passion that I had always thought about. But then I went into kind of secondary school, and to be honest, it was reinforced in secondary school. I was essentially told at the end of my end of year exams in secondary school that I was bottom of the year group, like in terms of my performance. I was the lowest performance.
Were you like academically, you weren't smart?
No, I wasn't at all. Oh. I was academically very, very ungifted. I was one of the lowest performing students in my school.
Why do you think that was? Were you just
this is the thing that I tried to tackle for not only myself, but for my clients, for everybody that I work with. I really tried to tackle this limiting belief that we put on ourselves, because what I said to myself when I was younger was, I'm from a Pakistani background, and because I'm not from a Caucasian or a kind of, how do I word this? Not from a background that has much fortune, if you see what I mean. Like I haven't inherited my parents are not like massively educated. Of course, my mum is someone that's really, really helped me, because she has invested in her education. But because I'm not from a background of like doctors and lawyers and all of these things, I always said to myself, well, it's just like genetic. I'm just not going to be as smart as these people. Are
you the eldest child?
No, I'm the second youngest.
Oh, you're second. How many siblings do you have?
5 siblings. Yeah.
What did your siblings do, like in terms of
So my older siblings, they're all in kind of, mashallah, good fields.
Yeah.
My older brother, he's got a PhD in psychology, so he actually has very, very good insights at times.
From memory.
Not necessarily. Actually, most of the stuff that I've learned has been my own research. To be quite honest.
I did psychology in A levels, but just AS.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it.
Did you? Cool. It is an interesting subject, and the more I delve into like the human psychology, the more I'm able to actually assist people, which is why I try these brain hacking techniques, and I invest in it. I invest a lot of money into learning tricks like that in order to make people's lives a lot easier on their journey as well. Because ultimately, for me, it's not even about the kind of investment involved. It's actually about, if I benefit from a kind of intelligence standpoint where I can then offer that intelligence to someone else, if I benefit from that standpoint, that's worth more than the money. Because some people have different motivations. This is why I'm really a really big advocate for being a pilot. Like, that's a profession, it's not a business. Like, a lot of people are doing this to promote businesses and like business endeavors. I'm doing it from the pilot element because I believe that there's actually 2 ways you can look at life, and there's one way where you can pursue your dreams and your aspirations and the things that give you those intangible, like really, really good feelings. And then there's the financial element, the material, like the material side of things, where you can pursue a lot of money and wealth and all of these kind of things, which is either way, it's absolutely fine, whichever you pursue. But I'm the advocate for, if you've always wanted to be a pilot, then there's absolutely no reason you can't endeavor in that pathway too. And I also believe that that gives me more value. Like if I was earning millions and millions of pounds, I still would be a pilot. I genuinely believe I don't need the money, to be honest, to make me happy. What makes me happy is the fact that I'm doing a job that I've always wanted to do and always have been passionate towards. So that's where my motivation spirals from. But to kind of like attach it to the point, my family and my parents are all, alhamdulillah, my parents were not educated and we're not from like a very fortunate background. But I associated the fact that I was stupid, or that the fact that I didn't pass these exams, to the element that I just wasn't in the environment, or I wasn't genetically able to do that. And that was a massive limiting belief. And that stuff, limiting beliefs are a whole world of kind of a whole pool of snakes, really, because they can stop you from pursuing anything great in your life. And one thing that I had to really understand was I had to crush these limiting beliefs. And the first exposure I had to crushing that particular limiting belief, I went into what was called it was a boxing club at the time. It was called High Wycombe Amateur Boxing Club. And the first kind of sparring session I had, I remember just getting absolutely beaten up and walleyed. Like I wasn't very good when I started out. And to be honest, I continued to persist because I just enjoyed the fact that I was doing something productive with my time rather than spending my time on the PlayStation doing those kind of things. I felt good after a boxing session, even though I'd gotten beaten up. I felt good because, again, like you've worked hard and you can see that the sweat's been drained and you've been really, really put through your paces. But then I also started getting addicted to it because I started seeing progression in my boxing. I would actively seek sparring sessions with higher and more experienced individuals simply because I was getting better by actually choosing them rather than the guys that were less experienced. A lot of guys chose the people that were less experienced because it would give them the ego boost, it would give them all of these outward confidence boosts, which I wasn't really actively seeking. I was seeking just progression in this particular craft. And what I understood through my boxing journey was that if I focus and commit my time to anything that I do, then I know I can succeed in that. My first boxing match was probably one of the most difficult times of my life, but I actually lost it. And I invited all of my friends, everybody, to watch that boxing match, and I lost it. But I learned some of the most valuable life lessons from that loss. And I learned that there's going to be times where you do have these rock bottom moments where you feel like everybody's against you and everybody's like judging you for whatever you're doing. But it's how you react and respond to those moments, which is what makes you very, very strong. It sounds very cliche, but it's very, very true as well. That is how, the way that you respond to those particular situations is how you can then go on and perform well and much better in the future. Because the very next week I had my second boxing match and I absolutely wiped the floor with the guy. And that's not to boast and be arrogant in that way. It's just simply because I learned from those mistakes, and the mistakes I made in that first boxing match was simply the mindset. It was, I walked in there assuming that I was going to win just because of how hard I had worked. The reality is there's so many elements to it, and I also put an immense amount of pressure and stress on myself to win. And I understood in my second boxing match that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make sure that I calm my nerves. And now, even when I go into the flight deck, I always make sure that if there's any emergency situation, the first thing I do, I don't panic. I don't like rush into that emotional state that I was in my first boxing match. What I do is I calm myself down and then I focus on what the task is at hand, kind of thing. And then I think logically about it from there. And that is the beautiful element of boxing, which I learned, and this is why I encourage a lot of younger guys to do martial arts sports. If you look at the top performing athletes in any sport, but particularly for me, it resonated in boxing. For example, Floyd Mayweather, and I'm not a massive advocate for him. I don't really like him as an individual, but you can learn something very, very useful from someone like him because he does not work off of brute force. What he works off of is outsmarting his opponent. And this is a brutal sport. This is like a sport that requires brute force. And yet he doesn't utilize that. He utilizes his brain. And this is why I feel if you can utilize your brain in the right way, This is more powerful than anything you can achieve or aspire to accomplish in life. If you can then work inwardly on that introspection and work inwardly on how your brain works and how you can optimize how your brain works, that's when you will then perform to the top levels wherever you are in whatever industry you're in. And so that's why I think when I was younger, I had so many limiting beliefs that were telling me I'm not smart enough and I'm not good enough and I don't deserve success and I don't deserve all of these things. And in fact, on my phone screen, I've literally got a list of them. I've got a list of all of my limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Because what I do is every time I open my phone, I look at them and I read how ridiculous they are. Because the reality is they are ridiculous. And us as human beings, we put these limiting beliefs on ourselves to almost procrastinate on our goals. There's something called perfectionism, and what everybody assumes before they take action on any of their goals is they have to do something really perfectly first. They have to be in the perfect position. But what someone said to me in my kind of like endeavors in pursuing this particular service, they said to me, when you're thinking about being like perfect, because I was always like, oh, I'm not going to do it just yet. I want to make sure that I'm at this particular level. I want to make sure I'm a captain. I want to make sure I'm at like the top level of a pilot first before I start helping guys. But I'm actually a first officer. And what he said to me was, if you, what perfection actually is procrastination. It's just disguised. And what he also said, and there's a famous quote, imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. And that resonated so deeply with me because I realized actually I'm only going to be this young once. And I'm only going to be able to take action on my goals at this moment in time once. So I might as well start. I might as well start helping aspiring pilots. And if when I do become a captain or whenever I get to the positions that I want to get to, then I can even reinforce that support and reinforce that help even further. But it would have been even harder to start later in life than it is now. I have more opportunity to take risk at this age. And if I did it later in life where I have more responsibility, more things to think about, then it would be more difficult. But to again digress, I go into so many tangents. I apologize as ever. But yeah, the limiting beliefs element is where it all starts. If you can crush those limiting beliefs, then the world is basically your oyster at that point.
At what point were you when you realized that mindset was so significant?
To be honest, it wasn't until later in life where I started to understand why I'm in this position. Because I then started to think about why I'm in this position. When I was going through like school and then I started flight school and all of these things, I was really committed to the cause that I was in. I was invested in the fact that I had to pass my training, I had to pass my tests, I had to do all of these things first. And then I got to the end of it all and I finished everything that I had accomplished by 22 years old. I'd become an airline pilot. And I thought like, oh, wow, like what do I do next? And it was almost, there was a period where I was almost a bit lost in some ways because I didn't know what exactly I was supposed to be doing next. And I was always someone that had a goal that I was working towards. And I got to a point where I didn't have a goal because I'd already accomplished and I'd achieved that goal at a very young age, which alhamdulillah, it's not to boast. It's just simply because I was so indulged in the process that I didn't actually acknowledge how much I had achieved at the time. And I still don't, to be fair, to some degree. A lot of people tell me, like you don't really realize how grateful or like amazing the position that you're in. Because I'm constantly thinking, well, I want like to be in a different position.
Always dangle.
It's always like that.
And it always becomes further and further away from you.
There's a famous quote. How it goes is every form of addiction is bad, whether the narcotic is alcohol, morphine, or idealism. Yeah. And ultimately, as human beings, idealism is something that we're all susceptible to. We all want the ideal world. Exactly. We're always chasing. And something that I realized when I finished and accomplished all of those goals and became a commercial pilot and I had done what I had set out to do, I then realized, damn, like what's next? And that's when I started looking inwardly and I started thinking, well, actually, I've adopted through all of this struggle throughout my life, I've adopted a mindset that is a bit different, if you see what I mean. It's a bit neurodivergent. And it's because I've adopted that mindset, I can apply this to helping people. I can apply this to something that one was a massive problem. It was a massive problem sourcing information as to how to become a pilot. One of the most like buzzword titles you can ever put in any video is how to become a pilot, because no one knows. If you asked someone like, oh, or if you saw an architect, or I guess even an accountant, right? Like I suppose accounting is a little bit different. If you saw someone in medicine, you'd just assume, all right, they've gone to uni, they've done this, they've done that. You know what the process looks like. But when it comes to a commercial pilot, it's like, well, how did he do that? And so it's a very, very blurry area. And so why I do this now is to open people's mind to the fact that there is a way in. I allude massively to the 4-minute mile. So his name is Roger Bannister, the first man to ever do the 4-minute mile. And then very, very shortly after, 12 other people were able to do it. And so what I try my best to do is be almost that kind of staple figure for a lot of young Muslims particularly, but anybody anyway that is thinking about becoming a pilot, even if they're not Muslim. Yeah. What I try to be is that staple figure that if I can do it, then there's no reason you can't. And it's that limiting belief element. If before the 4-minute mile, there was a consensus limiting belief that it is impossible to do a 4-minute mile, and then Roger Bannister does it. Yeah. And that just completely crushes people's limiting beliefs. And so what do? 12 people then carry on and perform the 4-minute mile. And so I think if I can reinstill that within our community as well, that, well, I had all of these limiting beliefs and yet I still got through to the other side, then there's no reason that a young Muslim or a young anybody that wants to be a pilot can't do it too, if you see what I mean. Because I wasn't from a fortunate background. None of my parents are pilots. They're all from different fields. My dad was from Pakistan. Like, he moved to the UK. My mum, she was earning not the greatest salary. They were living in council houses when I was not born at the time, actually. Yeah. When my siblings were born, they were living in council houses. And alhamdulillah, over time, they managed to progress and they've invested in their education and they've, alhamdulillah, managed to support me in my education. But it's all come from investment, one, in themselves mentally, and also financial investment into our futures as well as their children. Alhamdulillah, I think that's so resonant for me, and it's meant I'm in this position that I'm currently in now, which I'm truly, truly blessed to be in. Alhamdulillah, Huzaifah.
What gave you that courage to flick a switch and say, that's it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do my pilot exams, I'm going to go study?
Yeah. Well, there was a key fundamental moment in my life where I decided, you know what, this is going to be something that I actively pursue. Because there were times where I thought about doing other things. There were times that I thought, I could be a chemical engineer or go through like a different route and just do something completely different. But then I think what happened was I was in school at the time in the combined cadet force. So I was in the RAF section of that simply because I wanted to get a trial flight. It was always something I was interested in. And I'd never been on a commercial jet in my life before that point. I'd never been on holiday. My parents just didn't have the means to take us on holiday. And so I'd never been on one. And I thought, this would be cool to go into the RAF section of the combined cadet force and get potentially a trial flight. So I signed my name up to that combined cadet force, and then I signed my name up to the trial flight as well. I managed to get it, and I really do think this is Qadr Allah, because I don't know, like sometimes they don't take everybody on these trial flights, but I managed to make it onto that list. And the moment that I left the surface of the earth, the moment that I physically carried on, like in terms of the takeoff and everything, that was the moment that I decided, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. Because even to this day, I remember it so vividly, but it's so hard for me to describe it because I don't remember it with words. I just remember it visually because of how substantial the moment was. But it was a really, really resonant moment where I said to myself, to be honest, if I could make this into my life every single day, then I know that there would be nothing that compares. Nothing, no amount of money could, no amount of money really could give me the satisfaction that I had on that day where I saw all of this beautiful landscape and saw a completely different perspective of the world, really and truly. And that was where I basically sparked the interest of, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
How were your parents? What was their reaction?
The initial reaction from my parents was actually very supportive. And I know
Did
that
you expect that?
Oh no, I knew that they're supportive. Alhamdulillah, my parents are the staple figures of every ambitious endeavor I have gone through. If I think about why I'm doing anything in my life, it's because I want to make my parents proud. And so when I think about even becoming a pilot, they were always, from the first instance, very supportive. And they've been always really pushing towards all of us as children to do good and great things. And so I credit so much of my success, particularly to my mum and dad. And my mum, she helped me massively financially. She was working 3 jobs in order to fund the training for my pilot course. So there were days where I was waking up and I would see her getting ready she would come back from her night shift, get ready for her day shift. And so she was doing 3 jobs. Then on the weekend, she wouldn't have to do the night shift, but she would be doing another weekend job. So there were 3 jobs at one point in time that she was doing in order to fund this particular loan that we had to take out to afford the pilot training itself. And so that was a really, really difficult period in my life. But I accredit so much of the reason that I'm sat here now to my mum and my dad and their sacrifices in order to get us here. And I will always be indebted to her. Alhamdulillah, it's been 3 years since we finished and I started earning. I started my pilot training at 19. I'm now 25 and we've paid everything off. There's literally nothing else to worry about in terms of the loans and everything like that, because as you can imagine, like once you qualify as a pilot, you do earn relatively well and you can pay off those loans relatively quickly. And I'd say to my mum, like, I'm never going to stop paying you on a monthly recurring kind of thing. This is her return on investment. Her ROI is insane because I'm never going to stop paying her. And it's just simply because I'm so indebted to her and her sacrifice. And she always tells me, like, you can stop, like, don't worry, you don't bother paying me. But as her son, like, I'm incredibly indebted to her sacrifice, not only from a financial element, from every angle possible. Literally the spiritual element, the supportive emotional element. She was always there along every single step in my journey. And I remember the day that I got the airline job that I was looking for when I first started out, my mum was there in the room and she spent the whole day with me to make sure that I was feeling comfortable in terms of, because I knew I was going to get a call, and she was with me that whole day waiting around with me to support me because I was really, really nervous at the time. And alhamdulillah, if you have supportive parents, that is something that can transcend you to a completely new level. And there's a really interesting quote, and how it goes is, you should live as if you are living for all of your ancestors. And I really resonate with that because right now, the position that I'm in, if I look and trace back to maybe 2-3 generations earlier, prior to my parents, they were probably in the mountains in Pakistan doing something completely different to what I'm now doing in my life. And if, for example, a particular relative of mine far up that family tree didn't marry to another particular relative, and then all of these things didn't come into place, where then my grandfather didn't decide he wanted to move to the UK, and then my mum and my dad didn't end up meeting. If all of these little trigger events never happened, then I wouldn't be in this position that I'm in now. So when I look at accrediting all of my success to my parents, I have to also accredit all of my success to the ancestral tree that I've come from, because alhamdulillah, we're all in the places that we're in right now for a reason. And I think if you don't take action on the opportunities you have in front of you, then you're missing out and you're letting that ancestral tree down. Because the reality is, you need to make sure that if you've got these opportunities, you take action on them. But that requires destroying those limiting beliefs and saying to yourself, if I want to pursue this, like you were saying about that trigger event, if I want to pursue this, then it doesn't matter what comes in my way. I'm going to pursue this. Nietzsche said a really famous and profound thing: if you have a substantial why, then that will overthrow any how. And I'm obviously paraphrasing, but it resonated massively with me, because if you have a why to live, then any how to live or anything else that comes your way, anyone telling you you can't do this, you can't do that, is going to be devoid. So it's about having that why to live, which I think is really, really profound. And it's what led me to the position that I'm in now. And if you can trace it back to your why is to make those ancestral lineages proud, then you can also give yourself a reason to pursue anything great, whether that's in business, whether that's in any other avenue of life. And you shouldn't give yourself excuses to not pursue those things. In my opinion, it should be always, if I've got the opportunity, you should go and take action for those, towards those goals of yours.
Did you ever find, whilst you're doing your pilot course, did you ever find anything difficult?
Oh, 1,000,000%. So at the moment, there's 13 ATPL exams. There was 14 ATPL exams when I was doing them. And those are the theory exams, essentially. They're called ATPL, which stands for Airline Transport Pilot License Exams. And for me, that was like one of the most difficult periods of my entire life, because I was in there against like absolute titans. There were guys on my course that had done aeronautical engineering degrees, all of these really, really well-rooted industries that they had come from, owned businesses, multi-million-pound businesses, some of them at the recruitment stage, which I met. I was just thinking, this is crazy. I'm 19 years old and these guys are all like absolute titans in their fields. And I'm kind of competing with them in terms of pursuing becoming a pilot. And for me, that was a really tough part of my life where I had to basically say to myself, despite their backgrounds, I also have my reason for being here. And I have to acknowledge that my reason for being here, it transcends the reasons for them being here, in terms of it transcends like my purpose is to become a pilot, and their purposes have led them to this same point. But ultimately, why I found it difficult was because they were far ahead in life. They had a lot of life experience, whereas I didn't. So my only understanding of the theory exams and how to approach them was from my school education system.
Did you have that did you feel the added pressure that your mom's working three jobs to fund you to do this, and whereas these other people, there, it's probably pocket change for them?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, Josefa, because actually that was probably one of the most toughest parts of that training. I think the reason the other elements of training were a little bit easier is because I didn't see my parents and my mum as much, because I was sent to America and to other places to do the training. Why?
You did your training out?
Yeah, in America. I did some of it there, because what they do in America is the flight training is a lot cheaper in those countries. So it makes it a lot easier for us to fly. General aviation in countries like America and those kind of places is a lot more open, and it's a lot
because they have loads
cheaper.
of domestic flights and things like that as well.
Yeah, they've got a lot of general aviation capacity and accommodation. So it's a lot cheaper. And that's why flight schools send people to America. But to return back to the point, I found it easier in those moments of training because I didn't have to physically see my mum going through that kind of like, oh, one day she's working the day shift, then the night shift, then the weekend shift. I didn't have to see that. So yeah, it was almost like ignorance was bliss in those moments. But during the theory exams, because it was in Oxford and my house is in High Wycombe, I was commuting back and forth. So I was physically seeing it every single day. And that made it really difficult from an emotional standpoint. And then from an academic standpoint, it was really difficult because I was constantly comparing myself to all of these people that were around me who were absolute titans. And obviously the famous quote, comparison is the thief of joy. And I found that I was comparing myself very, very frequently to the people around me. And I got to a point where it was really, really overwhelming. And I thought to myself, there's no way I can do this. Like I'm really, really struggling. And all of these guys are finding it so easy. The reality was they weren't finding it easy. They were just trying to almost project the fact that it was easy, if you see what I mean. So what I ended up doing, and alhamdulillah, I find that there's so many little staple marks in your life. And I credit most of those staple marks to Islam. And that's what has led me to the position that I'm now in. And I'm so accredited. I'm so grateful, alhamdulillah, for Islam. But what happened was I was performing Jum'ah in the flight school academy. And I happened to come across a guy that was a bit ahead of me. His name is, I probably shouldn't say his name, but he was a really, really nice guy, because what he did was he could see I was visibly stressed about my flight training. I even voiced it to him. I just said, Assalamu alaikum. I can see you're ahead of me, you know, like, do you have any advice? And he could understand that I was getting a bit scared in the fact that I'd invested a lot of money. £130,000 is how much it costed in total for my training. Yeah. And £100,000 was how much I had invested at the time into the training, which was really, really substantial amount for us. Like I said, my mum was from a council house. Like we weren't very, very well off, like most people in this industry are. So it was an extensive investment that she had made, and the pressure was immense. And so when I spoke to him, what he said to me was really, really useful information in terms of how I could navigate the process. And this is now something I apply to every element of life. If I can find someone that has done something before that knows it more than I do, then I'm going to outsource that. A lot of people have a little bit more of an arrogant mindset that they can do everything. But the reality is it's not like that. Even Richard Branson, when he's starting any new business endeavor, he's always outsourcing people that know how to do it better. A bit like yourself with kind of the marketing element, right? So it's always outsourcing people that can do things or have specialized in things more than you have, if you see what I mean. And so now I even adopt that myself, and I think, well, I can't do everything. I have to outsource people that might be able to do it better than me. And I apply that to this particular situation because this guy was further ahead on his journey than I was. And so what he did to console me was give me the advice that he used in order to pass his exams. And the advice was just very, very clear, concise. And he was someone from a similar background to me, which made it even easier for me to follow his advice because I resonated and related to him very, very quickly, simply because I trusted him and I knew that we were from a similar background. We probably had the same upbringing, same struggles. And so I thought, well, he's probably the best person to talk to in terms of how I can approach this particular situation. But I spoke to him. The end of that conversation it just completely shifted my mindset. And I started approaching the exams, forgetting about what everyone else had said and locking on to exactly what he had said and exactly how he approached the training in order to pass his training. What I ended up doing, finishing all of those 14 exams, I finished with an average of 90% across all 14 exams. The pass mark is 75%. And I absolutely excelled in that simply because I had heeded his advice and ignored everybody else's advice. People were telling me to do this and that. I said to them, well, they've not seen it before. They were guys on my course that hadn't seen the exams and the tests before. And they were assuming that this is what we needed to know. But this guy had actually physically seen the tests, and I said to myself, I'm just going to trust him. Almost a blind trust in this particular individual. And alhamdulillah, because of that blind trust, I managed to come out the other side performing incredibly well. And it also alleviated a lot of stress and pressure from myself when I was actually revising and studying for the exams, because I had that trust in that he knew what he was talking about. And so it alleviated the pressure off of my shoulders. To the same extent, I did have a lot of emotional pressure still with obviously what my parents were going through and what my mum was doing in order to help me financially and stuff. But alhamdulillah, I've gotten through to the end of all of that. And this is why I now do what I do, because I know how difficult it can be for specifically young Muslims and specifically aspiring pilots. It can be a really, really scary and massive mountain to climb initially. But the reality is sometimes it's also useful to have someone to hold your hand up that mountain. And if you can have someone that you can trust, then that is something that you can really rely on in really difficult times as well. And so that's why I offer this now, alhamdulillah. It's something that I think people didn't really offer in the past. It's very difficult to outsource information from pilots. Generally, we get to the position where we've gotten into the airline world and we almost forget about the challenges and the difficulties that came before us. And there's a reason, and it's because we don't want to remember how hard it was at that time. Even now, I speak to so many people, and it does really hurt sometimes when I speak to the guys that have gone through failure after failure after failure, and you just think this is really, really tough situation to be in. And I understand why people can get demotivated and uninspired to continue and stuff. But the reality as well is that if I don't do this, then there's not really anyone else that does it. So alhamdulillah, I'm also fortunate enough to be able to provide help to younger guys. And it's nice as well. It's very, very humbling to be able to speak to them. And it makes me appreciate my job even more because I know how grateful and how blessed I am to even be there. So alhamdulillah, yeah, it's a massively blessed position that I'm now currently in, alhamdulillah.
Why did you go down the route that you did go down instead of maybe a different route? Because things could be different now, but I remember probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, you see things like where you can do almost like an apprenticeship in becoming a pilot. Yeah, so nowadays there are more openings in terms of how you can get into the industry. So there's generally 4 fundamental ways to get in. The first way, I'll start with like the least expensive. Yeah. The first way
will be the military route, where everything is paid for you, and you obviously have to serve time there and do whatever you need to do. That was something I was considering initially. I thought, if I can't do it with the financial element in mind, then what I can do is go through the military route and just get the government to basically pay for it. The only downside and the caveat to that was that obviously the military element requires you to then potentially go into a battlefield and go to war where you're not necessarily agreeing with that particular involvement or whatever you're doing. So you have to be someone that doesn't necessarily mind that, and it wasn't attuned to me. And also there was a military element to it, like you had to do parades and those kind of things. I wasn't too bothered about that. I just wanted to fly an airplane, and I wanted to earn I wanted to go and earn a commercial airline job somewhere else. I didn't want to do time in the military. So that option was basically crossed off. Then the next cheapest option, or another free option, will be a cadet program. So how that works is, and it's only a very recent phenomena, because before, when I was training, there was nothing like this, and it's an indication that there is a massive demand for pilots as well. What they're doing at the moment is airline sponsored programs. So airlines, for example, British Airways are doing it. They sponsor someone's training from start to finish. So what they'll do is they'll basically help you and guide you with the financial element and everything like that, as well as they'll get you into a really good flight school. From the start of your training to the end of your training, you'll be a qualified pilot by the end of it for that particular airline. And so you're applying for the airline, and you're applying for the actual cadet flight school itself as well. So you're applying for two different entities when you're doing the application for that, and they are incredibly competitive nowadays. So not many people get them. I was working.
Did you ever try?
I wasn't even able to have that, because at the time there weren't any. Yeah, there weren't any cadet programs when I was starting out. If there was, then I would have tried, but I wouldn't have put my whole heart on the fact that I need to get a cadet and sponsored program. And that's what a lot of people do now. They rely on the fact that they need a cadet program in order to become a pilot. However, the reality is that's not the case. I was speaking to a guy recently. What he had done was, year after year, he'd been applying for cadet programs, and it's almost like a lottery. So he was applying 1 year for one, he didn't get in. The next year he applied again, he didn't get in. So it was 5 years that he was doing this, 5 years. And I was just thinking, that was when I was just about to start finishing my training. I was thinking, that's insane. So for 5 years, he's wasted time trying to get a free sponsorship program, when actually, if he had just started taking action, he would have been able to pursue becoming a pilot, and he would already be earning and be living the job that he's trying to seek out. And he had the money as well. He just wanted to do it because it would save him the money. I was just thinking, this is insane. So there are people that will rely heavily on those cadet programs, but I wasn't someone that was going to do that. Equally, I respect people that don't rely on those and that say, well, I'm going to try, but I'm not going to just put all of my eggs into that basket. But that is another option. Then we go into the more expensive, but obviously not the most expensive option, which is the modular route. So that essentially is you pay for each license as you go. There's a number of licenses that we need, which I won't go into too much detail in because it can get very confusing. But there are a number of licenses that you need, and you can pay the flight schools to give you each license as you go. And that is another method, and it's a little bit cheaper.
It's funny you say that, because my brother actually is a pilot.
Nice.
But not a commercial pilot.
Yeah.
He's a fake pilot, basically. Then small little planes, he just ended up doing it as a hobby.
Yeah.
I've been on a few flights with him.
That's fun, man. Yeah.
We went from like Birmingham to Blackpool and things like that.
That's sick. Yeah.
It was wicked, man.
Okay. So yeah, there's the pay-as-you-go route, which is the modular route. It's a little bit cheaper, but it's not as expensive as the integrated route, which is the final route and the route that I took. Now that route is essentially from 0 to hero is what they'll do, but you have to pay a little bit more money. And that is the route that I generally recommend, because you are more likely to get a job as an airline pilot in that route specifically, simply because the standard of your training will be kept to a very, very high level. So I highly encourage my clients and people that are in the industry to go through that route. But there are obviously other ways of getting in there.
With everything that's happening in the world now in terms of Boeing and things like that, do you ever have any fears when you're flying?
Me as a pilot, no. But I know that a lot of people do. You get on board and you meet guys that are really, really scared of flying.
Yeah.
So the important element is to understand, is to get them to understand that these incidents and these particular occasions, they are incredibly rare, and we have a lot of safety measures in place that mitigate that. There are so many. I fly the Airbus. There are so many redundant systems that will keep you safe. It's impossible under normal law of the aircraft. It's impossible to stall an Airbus.
Yeah.
So for us, we're really sure that it's the safest form of travel. And what happens is people hyperbolize incidents like that to instinctively instill fear with people, because that gets attention. But
flying is the most safest way of travel.
It really is. It's
It's
safest.
actually mad, because I actually had in that Air India crash, like my second cousin and their family.
no.
So she was like
I'm so sorry to hear.
33 and the daughter's 5. And it did kind of like, it just puts everything into perspective for you.
For sure.
And we take loads of flights. I think in the last year we've had about 14 flights, me and my family, like my daughter and my thing. But yeah, so
it's the lack of control element that people obviously do fear, because you don't have control over that aeroplane. You don't know what's happening as well. It's like, I don't know if this is an engine failure, or if this isn't an engine failure, or if this is that. And it's all these weird noises going on. So it's a very scary thing. But we are trained to the utmost level. I mean, I don't know how much more training I could have done to ensure that I was at the top level of my life in order to pursue this career. So we are really, really intently looked at when it comes to airlines, when it comes to our training, when it comes to passing any exams. We're tested every single year, as a minimum every single year. Well, I'm tested every 6 months in the sim for emergency procedures, all of these things. So you are under really, really high scrutiny all the time. This is why obviously it's a good job in terms of the financial element. You earn well, because your job is a very, very highly responsible job. But you also have to keep a very high level as an individual too. And I think that is the fundamental important element for aspiring pilots, and for anyone that's in the industry. It's about looking introspectively and developing your skills from an inward point of view rather than externally, because some people can just externalize themselves and say, I'm this great person and I'm this and I'm that. But the reality is you have to look inwardly, and you have to be assured in yourself that you are this individual that is deserving of this role. And that also tackles that imposter syndrome element. The reason that you get the imposter syndrome is because you don't necessarily believe that you deserve to be in that position. But if you can inwardly say to yourself, I've passed all these exams, I've done all of this training, I've gone through all of these hurdles, and I've managed to get out through the other side, then you build within yourself that confidence and that ability and that understanding that this is the safest form of travel. There is a reason I'm here, and the reason that I'm here is to ensure that I continue to pursue and to continue to maintain a high level in this industry. And so I think the aviation sector is one of the most tightly locked in and tightly educated and tightly analyzed industries in the world when it comes to safety. So I think it's very, very, very unlikely that anything bad will ever happen.
Yeah. Adham, we're going to have to wrap up, but
not a problem.
I want to plan a part 2 from now.
Inshallah. Well, before we wrap up, I'll just go through my little list for you, so that.
Have you got the list?
Have you got the list? All right. Now I've got to try. All right.
I think I remember the list, to be fair.
Go on. You do it.
Yeah.
First.
Okay. Car, laptop, eggs, watermelon, lion, cat. There's something after cat. Baby. Lamp.
You done well. Okay, well done. How did you memorize it then? You need to teach me.
I'm Hafiz, by the way.
Oh, mashallah. So you have a brain hack already. Mashallah, that's incredible. Okay, well, I'll do it backwards for you.
Go on.
Lamp, baby, cat, lion, football, or ball, sorry. I imagine a football. Ball, then we go to watermelon, egg, laptop, car.
Bang on. Well done.
No, it's not a problem.
Well
but this is a little brain hack. It's just that